To order. It's May 20th, 9 a.m. Rights of public access. Um, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes.
We want to have a discussion of the RPAC budget. The question raised for tonight's select board meeting.
Okay. Everybody okay with talking about that first?
Yes.
Okay. So do you want to update us, Sonia, on what we need to do?
So basically this evening, there's the select board meeting. So one of us needs to represent the committee and basically give them an explanation of what we're looking what that budget money is going to pay for in the future and what our intentions are of using those funds.
Okay.
I
Does
think
anyone-
So that I reached out initially with the budget request, basically stating that we were looking for funds to cover surveying costs, and I try to keep it as simple as possible. So I would imagine we need to elaborate on that at the meeting.
anybody have any idea how much surveying costs?
No idea.
Neither do I.
I would guess since this is a budget for the following year, we probably want to keep it vague, or at least open for us to use the funds for what we decide in the future, because I don't think we have a solid idea of what we really need it for right now. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed various things. Like at one point, we were even talking about a map for the beach, at the southwest corner, which we determined would probably be too expensive. But there could be things like that come up, just various, depending on what our solutions are to various rights of public access. That there may be costs involved. So I guess just trying to determine what those costs are and how to bring that to the board at a meeting.
Did we ever discuss us paying for fixing the Way 100 mud hole?
We didn't discuss that, and that could be an option. I know that David Agger had said that he doesn't want to fix the mud hole because he finds it to be a deterrent, right? It's private property. He finds that as it stands, the mud hole reduces traffic on that road.
But somebody said something about the terrapin turtles using it.
Yes, so we have filled it in the past because the terrapin turtles were using it and then going into the puddle and then getting run over by vehicles. So they filled it for that reason in the past. But now it's obviously eroded again and is full of water. And as it stands right now, I know David had said he'd rather not fill it.
Yeah.
But I suppose it's actually in front of Lori's property, correct?
Yeah.
So then actually that would probably be up to Lori.
I mean, the point is it is private property and it is an access. So
yes.
in our, might be.
So we did have the discussion with Audubon asking for advice on signage and, possibly some kind of deterrent, like, we'd mentioned before, like a gate or poles with rope or something like that. So, maybe that's something we can use funding for, whether it is just installing a sign, just to raise awareness to the fragile environment or terrapin nesting or things like that to reduce people from just, joyriding on the road.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point. Sorry, go ahead.
Represent us at the select board. John, how about you? You're the most proficient in the town.
Well, I will have had by the weekend 4 meetings in 2 days. So I kind of beg out. I think either Melissa or Sonia would be a good representative. I think we first of all have to agree what we're asking for.
Yeah.
I had when I was running the Mayo Creek Committee, I had some basic surveying done to determine some elevation. So we would know how high various properties were above sea level. And that, I can't remember the exact prices, something between 1,000 and 1,500.
Hmm.
And that was for, I don't know, an afternoon's work. So a little bit of surveying can be expensive. I think we also talked about legal costs for some simple legal opinions. We may have been instructed to use town council for that. I'm not sure about that point.
I think we were, and I think we were told to go through the select board.
Select board on that. I think if we put together any reports which have some maps or documents in it, there's a cost to get those maps and documents done. I think we might want to put up some simple signs. And there's a small cost to that. So I can't remember what we asked for. It was 1,000, 1,500. I think,
We ultimately came up with 2,500, and I think that was from just the discussion of Heron Point Road and assuming that we would need surveying.
I would suggest that tactically we might offer to cut that back, but I think there's a general principle here that for small operating costs for our committee, the select board ought to be willing to delegate that responsibility to us for wise decisions.
Mhm.
Before I retired, I was in business, and there's always an issue of asking the top management not to micromanage things. And so I think we are right in asking for some money. 2,500 sounds maybe a bit on the high side, and I'd be willing to negotiate that down, but I'd like to stick with the basic point.
So should we say that that number is flexible and we're just kind of seeing what we can get for a budget? I mean, should we give a range?
I think we can say that it's, we're asking for that much, and then if there's any pushback, then we could say we'd be willing to take less.
Okay.
I think that's fair enough. But I think the general principle is we ought to be able to manage our affairs intelligently and not go to the select board every for every small expenditure.
So to sum it up, what would you say that the cost would be for, John?
The cost would be, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end, Melissa.
What would you say that, what would you tell the select board the cost would be for?
I would say some surveying, maps, signage, any small costs which maybe assisting in some road repair, any small costs that we would like to move along, and not with a limit, with a yearly, a yearly limit, so we know where our
Budget.
See, you're looking over your shoulder. I wonder. So the select board would know that this is not an open-ended request, and anything that goes over the amount of 1,500 to 2,500, either on an individual basis or an annual basis, we would come to them.
Mhm.
Okay.
So seeking legal counsel, as we mentioned before, that's something that goes through town council. That's not something we would have to get funding for.
That's my impression.
Okay.
Well, one of the reasons I think we could be a little flexible on the 2,500 is when we originally talked about it, that was legal, but then the select board said, well, no, we want you to come to us and go to town council. So that would reduce our obligations, financial obligations.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember from, let's see, I want to say the meeting maybe in January, we discussed a budget, and at that point, we were talking like about a beach mat and potential legal cost. And at that point, we had said 1,500. And then it was at, I believe, the next meeting where we were discussing surveying, and then we came upon the number of 2,500, as surveying costs can be quite expensive. So, and that's where that request eventually came in at 2,500. So then, with the legal costs changing and everything going through town council, I suppose, it would just kind of average out, because we were saying at first legal costs, then it turned into surveying, and now talking about signage and various other things. I suppose it would still come out about the same amount. So
Okay. I would be willing to attend the meeting if that works for everybody.
that would be great. I really have a hard time at night. I have to bring my son to various practices, so
No
I
worries.
struggle with the advisory meetings and all these things. So I'd appreciate it. I believe Ryan Curley, I don't know if you got forwarded the emails where he said that you can potentially just go up first.
Yeah, he did say that Mike might be able to let us do it at the beginning of the meeting, so that'd be great.
Yeah, right. I was seeing if I could change my schedule around, and my husband's actually going to be at a job, and he can't take my son, so
No worries.
okay.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
All right. So moving on, the minutes from April 27th. Does anybody have corrections?
There was a paragraph that was duplicated. I don't know whether you fixed that already, Sonia, or not. The paragraph that's just before the section 4.
Let me see if I can open it.
It's almost a complete duplicate. It looks
Oh,
like
maybe it copied or something. Let me have a look.
discussion of ownership of the road continues, and that paragraph is
Duplicated.
duplicated.
Let's see here.
And it should be before the vote was taken, not after.
427. I'm just opening up my document here so I can see what happened.
Gather not a lot of people got back to you before just now.
That's okay. It's an easy fix. My computer is getting a little old. Oh, here it goes. I was unsure if it was going to open the document running Zoom and everything else it's got open. Okay, so. Oh, I see there's like a duplicate paragraph.
Mhm.
Got it.
So that would be my only complaint.
Got it. So I just need to, somehow that got copied and pasted. Let's see. Okay. Anything else stand out there that?
I move we accept the minutes of
Yeah, I mean, I could just,
April 27th with the duplicate paragraph having been removed.
does that work for everybody?
A second.
Okay.
Vote, John?
Aye.
Aye.
Sonia, aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Vote passes. Or aye. 4-0.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so I think we're all set now. We can move to, what is it? The boathouse. So we left off at our last meeting discussing if we wanted to ask town council. I found a primer from KP Law, who is town council, telling us basically how everything that we need to do in order to lay out a town way as a legal public road. And it's clear in those steps that the town does need to secure ownership to the land under the road in order to make it a town way. And I think it's also pretty clear from what I've looked into that I don't think that happened. So I do like I'm 99% sure that this is a private road now. But I do think that we will probably have to confirm with town council. But moving forward, maybe we can shape the questions in a way that will give us some direction for how we go from here. So I can pull up some of the questions that we came up with and maybe we can edit them. Does that work for everybody?
Mhm.
Okay. I'm not able to share my screen because I'm not the host. So I guess I can't. But
Are you sure, Melissa? There's the green share screen at the bottom. It's not green. It is for me, even though I'm not the host.
Yeah, mine's green too.
okay. All right. I don't know how I missed that. Okay.
Down the bottom. If you move your cursor so that it's like, it lights up
Okay.
the mute, the
Got it.
participant. Okay, great.
Let me pull it up. Okay.
Yay.
I can't wait for Zoom to be over. Not this meeting, but until we move to real in person. Okay, so this, can you see that?
Mhm.
The Word document that I just wrote down everything that we talked about at the last meeting. The beginning describes the situation. And we had asked at the last meeting, we had said that we wanted to maybe ask if the road was in fact public. We can probably leave that there just to get confirmation. And then the second one was discussing the derelict fee statute, which now that I know, I think that the intention of it was to see what kind of ways that we could get access to it in case we weren't able to make the road public. But I do think that we don't actually need the derelict fee statute because we actually have prescriptive rights over that road anyway. And we can confirm that with town council, but maybe we should just get rid of this and ask if, how do we maybe prove that we have prescriptive rights and then we have that secured for the future.
And what are prescriptive rights? I don't know what that means.
Okay, so if somebody is using somebody else's private property for a consistently over 20 years, at least 20 years, then they have rights to continue to use that property no matter what the homeowner says. And there is definitely that situation here at the boathouse.
Right.
The
On the
only
footpath.
time, yes, on the beginning half of the dune trail. The only time that changes is if the owner stops use or stops that use and the person using it actually stops. So it's no longer consistent use. And that's my understanding. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But what that gives us is an unspoken right to use the property via prescriptive easement, or if you're the town and the public has been using that property, then they have the right to take it by eminent domain, which means that they can basically purchase the property, because they do have to fairly compensate the landowner for it. But the reasoning why they're able to do it is because it's been prescriptively used for at least 20 years. So because of that, I don't think the derelict fee statute is really relevant, but we can.
I see Helen is here. She has her hand up.
Yes,
Yeah.
Melissa, just to add one element to prescriptive rights being established, I believe that road has to be posted by the property owner and saying like something like no trespassing, private road, you can't use it. And it has to then be used anyway. And if the owner hasn't posted it like that and people just use it, I don't believe that that gives you prescriptive rights. So you can check that out easily. But I had a situation behind me here and also have had to look into it for town stuff. I think it has to have been posted by the owner as you can't use this and then used anyway. Please check that out. Thank you.
Okay, that makes sense. I think that would be prescriptive rights we could declare in case a future owner decides not to let us pass.
No, for 20 years then. You see, it has to have been used with that posting saying you can't use it. I believe I'm right about it. I'm going to look it up now.
Okay,
Thank you.
we can confirm. Well, there is definitely no written agreement here that the public can use this. It's always been verbal. What I do know is that if no, we can move on.
Well,
All right.
it seems to me the town could still try and get an easement over the road and over the dune to the beach without having to go through the derelict fee statute.
Exactly. So I don't think this really, I think we can get rid of it. Is that okay with everybody?
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. So
I'd like to be clear about Heron Point Road. It's not a town road. The town didn't take the right steps 40 or 50 years ago. It's owned by whom? By the abutters?
we can ask that. I believe it's the abutters, but I'm sure we want to confirm.
You were saying, Melissa, that the butters own to the center line.
Generally speaking, when a way is not a town way, the private owners own to the center line, and the members of the, if it's in a subdivision, the members have an easement over the length of the entire road. But I'm not a lawyer, and I do know that different situations might have different.
I think item 2 should be, what steps do we have to take in order to get a written, agreed right to pass over the road and pass over the dune to the beach.
That's where I was thinking also, because where you get to this, what looks like a roundabout, like a circle at the northeast end of Heron Point Road, the two abutters in question are the Aggers and Audubon, both of whom would give permission to cross that. And I guess where I'm getting at is that sufficient for us to go ahead and work out the easement agreement with the Aggers?
Without getting an easement over the road itself?
Well, we would, yeah, at the moment, no one uses the full Heron Point Road. It runs to the hexagonal house, and then it's a line on a map, but there's nothing there you can walk through.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to the circle at the end, that's at the base of that's at the inland base of the trail, the pathway that goes over the Agger property toward the boathouse.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, Don, that would be the derelict fee statute. So if
well, I think so. The question is, how would we proceed if we have the approval of both Audubon and the Aggers? How do we turn that into a permanent easement?
And could we perhaps go after the other property owners along the road and do the same thing there. I mean, from my standpoint, it's no sense in getting the right to use the circle, the turnaround, if you can't get to it.
Mhm.
Well,
Well,
then,
you can get to it by foot.
But
It-
ultimately, if we want
If you
to
come
secure
through the Audubon property, you get to it. You can't get to it by following the upland track of the road.
Well,
so
so you're saying the upland track is the one that's drawn on the map, and
Right.
but everybody goes over a lower one that's actually,
Yeah, because
in
the
and out.
second half of the upland path is just trees and bushes.
Yeah.
So where people go is they drive across the Audubon property to a parking lot, which I'm
which
not
is
sure if
actually
it's
on
on Audubon
property.
or not, but I think it's Audubon.
Mhm.
And then as you start up the hill, you cross this circle, which is the end of Heron Point Road. Now, if the people who abut that circle are the Aggers and the Audubon, if they say it's okay to go by
It-
some having some appropriate legal document, then I think we're home free. But that's a question we have to ask.
Do we need an easement to, like, to have this be a written agreement? Do we have to have an easement over the Audubon property? I know there's a verbal agreement at the moment, that the public can use Audubon property, but do we want to establish an easement across Audubon?
well, the Audubon has said in the past that they're not amenable to any
They don't want to do
easements
that.
or written agreements. So I think where it stands with them is it's just going to be the way that it is. If in fact the road is on Audubon property, the parking lot is on Audubon property, and then the beginning half of the dune trail is on the paper road, then John is right. We could just use the derelict fee statute if we have permission from the abutters to secure access to that dune trail, and then we are home free. We do have rights to do what we've already been doing,
Mhm.
which is go there. But the other point to make too is I think Ryan sent us an email about how to move forward, and I think we could also purchase the lot from the
Yes,
that might cure any issues with the title. And then we would be in a butter to the road and have access to it. So that might just be a cleaner way to do it, especially if the road changes, which we're not sure of. It might be the most efficient and cost effective way to do it too, because it just kind of gets all the ducks in the row. I don't know. What does everybody think?
So if the town, I mean, for me, the way I'm looking at it is that seems to make the most sense if we want to establish this as a landing and eliminate the issue with accessing it and using the road. I would think the town buying the property seems to make the most sense, but I'm no expert at this. And then if that were the case, then would we be needing to ask these questions, or would that be a different process?
Well, I'd
Well,
also like to say that, John, you're saying that those driveways up to those houses is the Heron Point Road. And I'm saying the place where we actually drive over now is Heron Point Road. So maybe one thing we have to decide is, where is Heron Point Road?
Mhm.
Are we driving now to get to that circle over
Well,
purely Audubon property?
I did find it interesting looking at that, the map, the history with the erosion on the Sandy Hook there. And actually, if you look at the road, if you just kind of like put your finger on where the parking area is or the end of the road, and then, move forward 20 years, it's like in a completely different spot. So that can continue to be a problem. The road and the parking area could shift again, and it could shift off of Audubon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it could. And
Also, those maps with the overlays are not accurate and not good enough to use for legal purposes.
Mhm.
Doesn't that bring us to a need for some surveying,
Surveying again.
by the way?
Yep.
I sent you guys an email, and it describes how the satellite overlay isn't by any means an accurate.
Accurate.
It can be as much as, I think it was like 80 feet
Mhm.
wrong. But it did also say if you're working with land title issues, I believe lawyers use the last standing survey. So even if we don't get a survey for what it is today, they're going to go based on what the last one was, which is the black dotted line on the assessor's map, which is an Audubon land for the Heron Point Road. So if we want to, oh, there's a chat. The layout of a road doesn't change no matter where the track is. Not sure what that means.
Not true.
What's on the surveyor's map is laid out by some pretty professional people, so I could go with that. With the town assessor's maps.
Yeah.
So the chat distinguishes between the road, which is what was laid out when the whole area was laid out, and the track, which is what we actually use.
So we'll get there. It looks like this black dotted line is what the last assessor said the road was, which is Audubon.
Right, which is pretty much all Audubon.
Pretty much.
So we can just use this, and I think that's probably what the select board is going to want us to do anyway. It is clear that it may very well change with sea level rise and marsh accretion. But for now, I think maybe we should use this, unless somebody thinks that we should ask the question, where is the road, and pay for surveyor.
Well, again, the overlay shows that the dotted track isn't where the picture of the road is. So
Yes, Helen?
Yes, I'm the one who supplied that chat. You're right, the last surveying job on this area is what would be referred to, and the layout is what's on that. For example, you see the layout of these lots where their lot lines are.
Yeah.
And earlier, a couple of slides back, or whatever you want to call them. Yeah, go back, please.
Where?
Well, there was one, I think, that had the layout, which is not the track. In any case, there's a layout on the assessor's map, Wellfleet assessor's map, in the assessor's department. You can go to that map and you can see what the layout is. The layout here goes along the lot lines of those lots and goes to that traffic turnaround. You see that's in yellow?
Yeah.
Yeah, aha, here we go. You see, it's where the yellow lines are, that's the layout, and it's a very specific width.
Yeah.
And wherever the sand tracks, and by track I mean what's being used by cars, wanders to, that's not what you refer to legally. You refer to where those yellow lines are, because that was surveyed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so we know Heron Point Road is not in fact the road we're using. Or I guess that's what we're asking.
But we'd want to secure access because it could be what we're using eventually.
Right. So I think it's important that we get access through the road no matter what.
Mhm.
And the simplest way to me to do it would be to purchase the lot, be in a butter, and have the easement over it. Or if the town wants to make it a town way, then they have rights to, I believe, prescriptive rights. And they would fairly compensate all of the abutters. But what is the process with town council, John? Should we just give the situation and ask a vague question? What are the different ways that we can secure this as a town landing? Or should we give them all of the different steps that we're going through?
I think we should leave it open. Let them tell us what they think.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I think we're having a hard time, figuring out what these questions are. And maybe that's because we just don't necessarily know what the best solution is. And maybe that's, the advice we need to seek. Like what is the best solution to basically secure the boathouse as a town landing?
I think Steve is right. The question to the town council should be, this is what we want to achieve.
Mhm.
What are the steps we need to take to get there? I have another question about this. I think Bruce is with us. And I remember a couple of years ago, we were talking with the Aggers about some sort of arrangement, purchase, and there was a question of liability was raised. And I don't quite understand the context. And if Bruce is here and could help, that would be useful.
He's got his hand up.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Bruce.
just a couple things. First, I thought, John, that you were saying that the Audubon property also had kind of a unique boundary in that it's something like the mean high tide mark.
Yeah, so the
Oh,
deed to
Melissa,
the
maybe you can-
Audubon is in the deed, the boundaries described for Loagee Bay here actually say that it ends at the upland lowland line, which is another question we can ask town council. Because if that's changed, then maybe they do in fact own the road. But I don't even know if that can actually change. And my understanding of the upland lowland line is just the mean high tide line.
Because if that's the case, it is going to change. I mean, we know it's going to change because the tides are changing. And how much of that, more of that, maybe Audubon right now than shows there. The other thing, just a couple of things. I wanted to come on because we are looking for access properties to help the Open Space Committee, to make it clear. And, we are going to have some funding that's definitely ours. We'd love to put do an easement with the Aggers. They've offered for a very generous amount of money. The issue with the liability and the reason we're going with an access rather than to actually purchase the property was that the Town Conservation Commission, the Audubon and the Conservation Trust, none of the conservation groups would take it on because of the boathouse, and the Aggers were really want that to stay. It's been used by shell fishermen. So my thought was we could buy the access, and the Aggers were appropriate. They were in favor of that, and so we'd have a way onto the beach without necessarily having that land go into conservation. So, we are all ready to use our CPC funds for that, or even if there was some funding for the walkway through that piece down at the very end. I think it's very interesting what John said. I hadn't thought about it that way, that really that at that lot, it's really the Aggers and the Audubon have at least half of, no, I don't know. That's a tricky one, John. But it looks like the Aggers and Audubon would be the people who have half and half of the property. So it may not be as hard as we were thinking of. But if we can, I think what everybody's been saying makes sense. See what the lawyers have to say. We have, an access we want to accomplish. And again, the Open Space is very happy to support this.
Thank you, Bruce.
Bruce, if the Aggers would still be interested in selling the whole property to the town, as long as the boathouse was guaranteed, I just wonder if a sale, if rather than worrying about what the Conservation Commission wants to do, I wonder if just the legal document that goes into the sale would say it's conservation land, there's to be no construction on it, it's to be left in its natural state. And by the way, there's this boathouse, which also is protected by the sale, the document of sale. So it's a private agreement between the Aggers and the town, and Conservation Commission's not involved. Still, it still
Oh, yeah,
gets
no,
to the same end.
Right.
Gets to
Right,
the same end.
I agree. I don't think our goal would not be to put this in conservation necessarily. If, as long as the town is willing to do that, we're willing to do. The cost is only about $10,000 more. So it, you know, it's something that is easily affordable. We'd be happy to buy the lot. Usually we do that, we'd have one of the conservation groups take the lot, and then we could guarantee, you know, the access, but the town can do it. It doesn't have to go into conservation. Again, as long as the town's willing to accept the lot and whatever liability that might go with it, we'd be happy to support that.
Well,
There's no-
I'm suggesting it's done by clarification of the deed when the sale takes place.
Right.
And the other thing Ryan said too is that the town could buy the lot with an easement for the people who use the boathouse.
Sure.
So that's a possibility to release them of liability. The town,
Right, that's a good idea.
so that's a way that we could do it. It seems the most straightforward way to me. But moving, so how do we move forward from here? So, are we going to have a meeting with town council, or are we going to submit all of our questions and get a paper letter back?
I would prefer a meeting.
Yeah, that seems efficient.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of moving parts.
Because
a lot of questions
we've
involved.
raised about 6 different questions here.
Right. So
But
maybe,
but the written stuff probably has to go to the select board for them to give us permission to go to town council. They
Yeah.
want to know what we want from town council.
so should we ask the town administrator and the select board to set up a meeting with town council in the future?
And you should give them a little bit of a hint as to what we're looking at. Ask them about.
Yes, Helen?
Yes, I just sent you all the policy that covers that process, how to ask for it. And I didn't send it to Steve and Bruce because I don't have your email addresses, but I sent it to Melissa and Sonia and John, and so you can share that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
So Melissa, it seems to me if we've talked about several things. The Aggers are willing to sell the property. The Aggers are willing to sell a right of way across their property. They do have a concern about the boathouse. And they did say that some time ago, I don't know how long ago, the town did look at buying or the Aggers did try and sell their property to the town. And the town didn't want it because they didn't want the liability of the boathouse itself. And those points should all be in the letter to the lawyer, to the council.
okay. So we can lay it all out on paper, everything we know, all of our questions.
Yeah.
I think
And then-
the point about the Audubon boundary is an interesting one that should be clarified.
Yep.
And it's in fact, it's an interesting, I had not thought of it. It's an interesting general. There may be other places in Wellfleet where a boundary is determined by the tide line, and
Exactly.
the tide is changing.
Exactly. And it's definitely relevant to anything else that we're going to look into. In some of the documents that have been sent around to us about who owns the tide lines, the intertidal area, it's been said that the upland owners who own the lowland, own the intertidal area, their land can change if the mean low tide line changes. So if that's true, then maybe it is true here as well. My uncle's a lawyer. I asked him if he thought that would be a possibility. He seemed pretty confident it wasn't, but it's worth asking.
But just if I could mention one other thing with the liability, I'm not convinced that the town itself said no. The Conservation Commission and Conservation Trust, the conservation groups were concerned about it and they didn't want it. But the idea of not putting this in conservation, just maintaining it as access, as far as I know, never went directly to the town. So I think that's really worth a question.
Okay. Okay, so can I make a motion that we ask the town administrator and select board for a meeting with town council regarding how we can create public access at the Lieutenant Island Boathouse?
Did you make the motion, Melissa?
I tried to. I think I said, can I?
Okay. I'll second the motion.
Okay.
And Sonia, you'll have to write it down.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Melissa, that Helen has sent out a document about procedures. I'd like to see that and propose to
Sorry.
I'd like to use that procedure to go to the select board to contact town council, and I think we have to clarify the issues for town council. Even if it's a meeting, which I strongly support, town council ought to have some idea of what it is we're talking about.
So,
So what this is doing is saying, this is sort of punting it down to our next meeting, I'm afraid.
asking town council would be punted to next meeting.
Yeah, I think we ought to come with a little sharper definition of what we'd like to do at this meeting. And be sure that we're following a procedure that Helen's circulated to us.
Okay. All right, so in the meantime, I'd be happy to put on paper everything we talked about, if that helps for the next meeting, and then maybe we can just look at it and say yes or no or edit.
Sounds
Here,
good.
here. Round of applause.
All right, we'll get there. Okay, so does anybody else have anything to say about the boathouse before we move on? Helen, is your hand up? Okay,
No, it isn't. I'm sorry. I forgot to take it down.
no worries.
Right.
And Bruce, you're not, your hand's not up either, right?
No,
I did have, it's probably just gumming up the works. I did have one other question that we might ask town council at some point. And this has to do with the other side, the southwest side on the second island, where there is a layout of evidently public roads. I'd like to know if the same rules about who owns those applies on the southwest side as the northeast side. Because when we talk about getting to the town lands, which are on the coast, and so there's some coastal access, the way you get to them is you're crossing private properties. And there's a way of doing it so that you can get there on the roads which are laid out. So if for example, Audubon should at some point say they don't want us crossing their property, is there an alternate way?
Okay,
That's a lower priority, and maybe it would just come up at the next meeting, but it's something that we should clarify at some point.
well, we have this opinion from 2006 regarding the southwest corner. Can you guys see that?
Yes, well,
It's-
I've got a
It's not very
copy.
clear, but I believe it says that the town has the right to get to the southwest corner. Is that right, Bruce?
That's my understanding and reading it.
Okay.
Okay, I'll just have another look at that, and if it's not clear, I'll raise it again, but let's leave it for the time being.
Okay.
Also, I can raise my hand.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, the other thing is, I know there's one small private property over there that actually is where the parking is or close to where the parking is, but you do have to cross to get to the path that's most used now. So again, if there's any point in the town purchasing that in the open space, would be happy. If it's a parking lot, I don't think that's going to work, but if it's a matter of access, by foot, we'd be happy to put our funds up to buy that if it comes to that. It doesn't sound like, from what the report is from the lawyers is saying, that we'd have to do that anyway. But I do find that there is that one piece that's owned by one of the neighboring people that would be nice to have in town hands.
We can look into that when we talk about the southwest corner again. All right. Everybody all right with moving on to the next agenda item?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So, the Shellfish Landings. Anybody want to go first on the 3 places that they want to prioritize?
I'll go first, but in fact, I should have the least say, since I'm not a shell fisherman.
We all have
Um,
a voice, Steve.
Huh? Okay, I would say Fox Island would be my number 1.
Okay.
Nail down Omaha Road would be my number 2, and the Boathouse my number 3.
Fox Island, Mayo, you said?
I'm sorry, say it again.
What was the second one?
Omaha Road,
Omaha. And the third?
Boathouse.
Boathouse. Okay. Some of these we're already looking into.
Yeah.
I didn't make my list with that in mind, but we can put it all together.
You wanted others beside the ones we were working on.
Well,
Is that
there, yeah, I mean, whatever you guys wanted to do. I think we're focused on those. I think moving forward, are there any that you are interested in putting some
Well, the Fox Island is one that we haven't,
okay.
we've talked a little bit about, but that's a complex one to try and get rights to.
Okay.
Vehicle.
Sonia, you want to go?
Yeah, I was trying, obviously, like, my priorities would be things that we're already working on. Number 1 being the Boathouse. And what I actually did is I looked at the different spots and I tried to make kind of like a radius around the spot, like on the map, for example, of like 1 inch. And, if you look at somewhere like Chipman's Cove and you make those radiuses, they all bump into each other and you feel like you've got a fair amount of access in that area. So I don't feel like, Chipman's Cove and Duck Creek aren't too bad because there's various places you can access those spots for shell fishing. I did happen to notice on the map that in the Duck Creek area, there's that condo complex there where you can actually access, and that wasn't on the map.
Where are you talking?
Right where the pier is, kind of above where it says boat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that spot. So I don't know if that's something we need to put on that map. Nancy, are you here?
I am.
Yeah, do you know
There's
what I'm
just
talking?
always something. I just forgot. I mean, it just slipped through the cracks.
Yes.
It is, it's
Okay, so-
totally private property, but there's usually nobody there when Duck Creek is open.
Right,
And
winter.
so it's used regularly, but it should be on there.
Yep,
It's just, there's always something. Yep.
Well, yeah, so that should be on there. Yeah, and like I was saying, the density of spots that you can get to the flats is, you know, pretty good in that area. The areas that it's not currently really, when you look at it, is, you know, somewhere like the Herring River. So that sand pullout, I think, is really important. You know, I don't think there's any problems with that being a landing right now because that's off of a road. But, you know, I wouldn't like to see any issues with that.
It is on private property, so,
It is, okay.
yeah.
Because
So,
that's a town road, I believe.
But I think that we looked up, I think Jordan and I looked that up, and that sand pullout is actually on somebody's private property. It's not part of the town road.
Interesting.
I don't, maybe that's worth you guys looking into.
right.
Um,
So, like I
seem to
said,
remember.
accessing the Herring River right now, I mean, you know, there are not many spots to get out there. Either you would have to drive from Powers Landing, or you can park at the sand pullout. And then the other spots are in the prohibited area, which are not open yet. So I would say that maintaining that access at the sand pullout is really important.
I would agree.
You know, especially for people who can't drive on the beach or don't have a vehicle. You know,
Right.
that shouldn't deny them the right to fish in that area.
And if sea level rise prevents us from driving it on the
Yep.
feature, I would hate to see
Absolutely.
no
So
access.
yeah, priority would probably be the sand pullout. Boathouse, we're already working on that. Same issue with Lieutenant, if we move to that map.
Sure.
You know, the access points are a lot less dense on Lieutenant Island and on this side of Indian Neck. So obviously in the future, like looking into the Fox Island access point, you know, more so for grant owners. And Lieutenant Island, also very difficult to access. Way 100, you know, if you look at that far south corner there, we have the access before the bridge and the split rail fence, trying to read this tiny writing, which is great. But once you go over the bridge, you know, Terrapin Nest going into Logie Bay, that area, it's very muddy and difficult to work in there. And it's more the other side that you really need. So that osprey nest is very important, you know, to give access to shellfishing on the other side of that. Was it Silver Spring? Is that what that area is called?
Silver Spring Harbor is in here, but
Okay, so this is called something else, right?
like Wolf Lake Harbor or something.
Yeah, so Osprey Nest and I don't know if I'm coming off the numbers here. Yeah, Osprey Nest and Lieutenant Island Northwest. So I guess if I could give 3 that are an issue that we haven't already discussed, it would be the sand pullout, the northwest corner, just because that isn't a neighborhood and I would worry about losing access there.
Yeah.
And probably the Osprey Nest. Which
Okay.
kind of, you know.
Awesome. All right, John.
I also picked the sand pullout. I called it the Chequesset Bluffs.
Mhm.
The concern, I think a concern we ought to keep in mind is that that's on private property. Private properties get sold and the new owner may not, may want to, you know, build a house on it.
Right.
So I think we ought to look carefully at alternatives in that area. It's sort of all the way from Powers Landing over to Fisherman's
Mhm.
Landing.
Yeah, and again, just that density of landings of spots where you can access the flat just really narrows out as you move farther down that road. And actually it's a pretty good shellfishing area, you know, for clams and oysters. And so, you know, there should be more access points technically, which, you know, I don't know if we can establish new ones. We're looking into sort of doing that right when the Herring River opens. there's going to be some spots established, but you know, we should be able to do better, I would think, right?
Yeah.
Cure something.
I had one point on Chipman's Cove. I had the south cove of Chipman's
Yeah.
at Cove Road comes in from the other side. Even though there's, I don't know if you can, I can't, I can't, that point on the map is covered on my view. But it looked to me like that's the most isolated part of Chipman's, and it ought to be looked at. There's a small path down there, but it cuts right across private property. And
Are you
again, I don't
talking
know
this way, or
about the long-term viability of it.
which one are you talking about, John? The one where my mouse is, or this one?
Southeast.
At the southmost point on the cove on Chipman's.
Fenceway.
Yeah,
Okay.
so Spenceway that's from a small road. And then I think, John, that you're actually talking about the southeast corner, because I think you had mentioned that to me in an email before. I knew anything about it.
That's probably it.
Yep. And
Could someone shift the map to the left, because I'm covered by people's faces.
So John, you can move the faces if you go to the black bar on the right. If you click it and drag it,
I get rid of the faces. Oh, terrific! No faces. Yes, it's what Spenceway, somewhere around that area.
okay.
Again, that's a question of there's
so
a
that's
way to the water. Then it's a question of long-term preservation of that right.
Yep.
right. And am I correct in saying that actually used to be a road there? So that little point right where it says Chipman's Cove, and there's like a little point right there on the right side that you can actually drive to from Old Pier Road, from that access point. If you have four-wheel drive, you can take a left onto the beach and then park down at that corner. But what it looks like there is that road used to continue around the corner right to that spot that you're talking about that is currently just a footpath. You know, it looks like originally there was passage there, and I think they touched on that in the Irene Payne video as well, that at some point it was purchased and blocked off.
They did. So that's been used. This is a private property lot. People used to park here and go fishing right in the marsh here. And then somebody, I don't know if it was a new private owner, blocked it off. And there were prescriptive rights for us to reinstate, you know, our right to pass. But since nobody did anything since then, I'm not sure if we lost those rights. But it's definitely something we can look into.
But we do have a right of access right by that footpath. So I know that we can park on the side of the road and use the footpath out there.
Yeah, I was
drive the vehicle around the corner.
to park there.
Again, you say we have a right, but if the property is sold and someone puts up a house,
Nancy's got her hand up.
it goes. Sorry, Nancy.
So what you're saying is that you used to be able to drive from Old Pier down to Chipman's Cove Southeast?
That's what the Irene Payne documentary says. People used to park there.
Mhm.
Okay, so Chris has been here for 21 years, can't remember exactly that, just so you know, I just wanted to provide that piece of information. It might have been, I mean, if it's in her documentary, then she's done her research, obviously. But just in terms of it happening in the past 2 decades, not something, you know, that was daily, if you will, or it wasn't used a lot.
And my third suggestion was the end of Old Briarcliff on Old Wharf. And my thinking there is, last time I was out there, which is maybe a couple of years ago, there's some sort of sign warning about driving the road at high tide, that may be a way out to that landing, which is at risk due to global warming and the increase in the tide level. So I put that down as really a general subject that we ought to look at a number of these access points and ask, well, what happens if as the tide rises? But
Okay.
that's my thinking there, is that it's a very low lighting area. And I remember seeing a sign warning people about driving it at low tide, at high tide, sorry.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so my three were the sand pullout for the same reasons Sonia said. And I said Richmond because I would hate to see whoever owns it stop access there. There is, even though this is a winter spot and we really don't have too many issues here with homeowners because they're not even here. I think there are so many people who fish in the winter. It's useful to have many places to park. So Richmond was one on my list. If there's any way we could make that a permanent agreement. And then the third for me was the northwest corner, because the only way I feel like we could get there if that were lost would be by boat, which so not everybody has one. So
Right. And it is in a private neighborhood as well, which is concerning, right?
yeah,
I mean, basically what it is I'm not sure if everyone's been there, but there's two sets of stairs that go down to the beach. There's a set of stairs on the north side, and then just to the west there's another set of stairs. And to be able to park there, you're basically just kind of parking like right in front of the stairs. There's not a whole lot of
yeah.
space, and it's just private properties. So I would wonder if that would become problematic.
Yeah, and that's something we should definitely look into, given that we know the tax takings may have created public roads, and I think we should figure that out. I know Ryan had said that he was trying to map it out. I don't know how far he got, but we could definitely look at that and see what is public, what is private right now.
Mhm.
That's a pretty well kept secret from me anyway. I tried to get there and I couldn't.
It's pretty hard.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like the A's and the numbered roads there and all the letters and numbers, they get really confusing.
They don't.
We call it the gauntlet.
They don't
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a maze. And I mean, even myself, if I don't go there for a while, sometimes I go the wrong way coming out and I can't figure out where I am, you know? I actually know the property owner there on the corner, so I just follow the signs to his property. But if you don't know the owner there, you wouldn't, you
Yeah.
know.
And Nancy?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you guys feedback that, you know, your prioritization and your discussion is really encouraging. It's just such a sigh of relief to know that you guys are working on this. It's so important. And as John said, it's going to become more important when we talk about climate change and sea level rise. So the other thing, I really don't have anything to add because you guys are prioritizing things that we agree are important. But one thing that I would like to put out there for you to consider, and I'm not sure how to go about it except maybe through Conservation Commission, is securing driving on the beach. It's in it's allowed now. It's in, I believe it's in the environmental regulations for the town. There's like 5 different groups of people who are allowed to drive on the beach. And commercial shellfishermen and shellfish farmers are included. And maybe that's enough, but I would not want to see things change over time. So I don't know how we would get it to be permanent, but I think that I've seen issues happen in other towns about driving on the beach. I feel that we have a long-standing history of driving on the beach without significant detrimental effect. I won't say that there's no effect, but I think that You know, if you look how and where people drive, it's by and large extremely respectful. I don't see, you know, beach grass getting driven over all the time. I think people are respectful of horseshoe crabs and terrapins. I think that there's just a lot of awareness in our community of the importance of the balance in our harbor. I want to make sure that that right is carried over into the future, no matter what happens. I think it would cause much difficulties for the amount of farms that we have, and also to be able to access some of the wild areas like the Herring River and things like that. And, you know, as people have mentioned, we've lost it on Lieutenant Island, and I am not looking backwards, and I'm not going to fight for things that, you know, happened before my tenure. But I do think that we should be looking forward and just guaranteeing that access into the future. And again, I'm not really sure how to do it. I just want to put it on your docket as something for you to look into and prioritize.
I think that's a really good point. I think we're going to come across that when we look at Fox Island as well.
Mhm.
We should definitely think about that. And then the other point that I think, Bruce, I think you had said to me in the past that we can create landings, but parking is always an issue. I don't know if you want to just mention anything.
No, concerning the right to drive on the beach, my understanding is it's there. There are some places that we have been happy to support as access points to the water, which we have more mixed feelings about, frankly, in terms of parking. So there are some issues here. I live over by Old Wharf, and there were, unfortunately, and I really think it's a minority, but people were really going into the marsh grass, and that's a place where, you know, we we do not support, obviously. So I think there are some tensions that come up when we get into this, but certainly supporting the ability for shell fishermen to drive on the beach is one that we support. And my understanding, just in brief conversations with the CONSCOM, that CONSCOM has even supported. They haven't gone against that. So, so overall, I think it's good. There are some properties that open space would be happy to be involved with, that I think it's hard to get parking access, is what I was saying, close parking access. I'm not sure it's down here. Cannon Hill Beach is an example. You know, the town owns that. We're not putting in conservation, but it's a very hard piece of land, I think, to get close parking to. If somebody wanted to park their car further away and walk there, that's not even something we need to be involved. That's something that is a town landing, in my opinion, and you could do. But I guess I'd just leave it at that.
We've got a lot of work to do. So I now hesitate to continue the conversation, but I had two other long-term issues that I wanted to ask people to think about. One is I was thinking about how do you like them apples process, and the town spent a lot of money to make sure we had a public resource out of what was privatized. And that, no, I'm not criticizing the people who privatized it. They were entrepreneurs. They made some money. That's America. That's fine. But we ought to ask if situations like that exist elsewhere in the harbor, and should we consider action? And the second thing I'd like to do is to ask you to remember, in the charter of this committee, it's not only about shell fishing. There are public access issues elsewhere in town. I'll name two of them. One is what happens as the Herring River is restored. Is there going to be sufficient access to the new estuary, or the regenerated estuary? And there's also, there's a state law that says any great pond ought to have a public access. And one of the great ponds in town, I can't remember if it's Herring or Higgins, it's the westmost great pond that the Herring River starts from. There's no public access on that, and there ought to be one according to state law. So there's some issues which aren't just shellfishing. And I would be pleased at some point in the future, maybe a couple of meetings down the road, that I'd spend a little more time and outline some of those concerns. But how do you like them apples? That might be something that we wanted to think about sooner rather than later.
Yes, Nancy?
So I just had two things. One, in response to John, just a clarification, they were securing access and they were securing their businesses. They weren't out there to try and make a buck, right? When they did it, it was desperation to make sure that they weren't going to lose their
Fair point.
farms.
Fair point.
Now, in the end, yeah,
Fair point.
in the end they did, okay, but the town gained a lot from that, and
I agree. Fair point.
and anyway, okay, and I like your idea, and I think that I'd be happy to put my head together with people about what areas are public and what areas are private in terms of grants.
Yeah,
Because grants, wild shellfishing can always happen, but farming has to have permission.
Right.
The other thing is, if you want to, I did find the town bylaw for vehicle access on the beach, and I could share my screen really quick and just show it to you if you wanted, or I could just send you the link.
Here's the screen.
See it? So,
Okay.
oops, it's this number 6.
Okay.
So this is a bylaw in our, general bylaws. It's not in I looked in the environmental regs, and it's not in there, in the Conservation Commission regs. So I just wanted to bring that up so it's in here, and I actually feel better knowing that it's in the town's actual bylaws.
Okay. Thank you.
There you have it.
But does that hold true if the beach is privately owned?
Yeah,
Good question. I don't know.
I
I think that grant holders have to have it written into their lease agreement, their access route, and how they, and if they are on private lands, they have to have permission from the owner for both access and their farm operations.
Yeah.
Ellen has her hand up.
yeah, just to add to what Nancy said, in the shellfish regulations, there is clear mention of the fact that if you want to drive your vehicle on the beach, you need to have the Conscom approve it, and the Conscom does approve it. And of course, if you're on a beach.
For farms.
For farms, yes.
Mhm.
But the thing is that it's allowed and supported by the Conscom, and it's, I don't need to repeat what Nancy said, because of course it was all accurate. Thank you.
But my question, it might be approved by Conscom, but if the upland owner owns the beach and he says no, does this override what he says? Go ahead, Helen.
No, it doesn't. What Nancy said was completely accurate, and it's also in the shellfish regs. If you want access, and that was one of the reasons that it was very important that the town bought the Head Delta property, because in order to get access to all those grants, you have to cross that beach. And we got the whole thing. But if somebody had bought the beach, even if people had licensed farms, right, in the intertidal area, and they couldn't have accessed it except by the water, whoever owned the beach could have said no, or they could have, charged for it. And the town is not, of course, going to charge for it. I have a question for all of you. Did whoever, could have been me, but I don't think so. Were you all given, sent a copy of the determination about ways in which the town could have Omaha Road be secured in some way? We got a written determination. The select board got a written determination from town council. And a question to you, Nancy, through Melissa. I'm assuming, because I haven't been to some of the other meetings, has this committee been brought up to speed about what's going on with looking into securing an easement with the Field Point Association?
I have not brought them up to date.
Okay, thank you. That's kind of interesting and important. It's a process that's ongoing, and I've stepped back from being involved with it, but it would be good for you to know about it. Thank you.
If you want, I can just quickly let you know that, so the town, the select board met, and it's kind of been turned over to a group of town staff, and we will be working on that. Working, so town staff, and we'll be working with the homeowners association over there on next steps. It's of course never as cut and dry as it seems, but there's certainly goodwill on both sides, and a fair amount of determination on both sides to make it happen. So that is going to continue to be worked on.
Okay. That's awesome to hear. All right. So can I make a motion that we schedule a meeting for prioritizing Shellfish Landings, maybe a joint meeting with SAB, to get some advice or requests?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. We discussed that before.
Okay. Anybody
Was
want
that a
to?
motion, Sonia?
Okay, so we didn't make it. So shall I make a motion to have a joint meeting with the Shellfish Advisory Board regarding prioritization of landings?
I'll second that.
All right, vote. John?
Yes, though I'm trying to think through what the meeting would say, but let's go ahead and get something scheduled, and it'd be useful to get additional input. Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Sonia?
Aye.
Melissa? Aye. On the last thread of thought that you mentioned, John, I think maybe it would be useful to ask Nancy to send an announcement in the crier saying that we are soliciting requests for anybody who's interested, and that would include anybody who has a private lease with somebody for their shellfish grant and is looking to perhaps make it more permanent.
Can you help me with that language? I'm sorry, we had a dog come into the office. I needed to say hi. So I just sent a crier out, so that, and Shellfish Advisory is meeting tonight. So that's May. So this will have to be sometime maybe in June or early July. I don't know what your kind of schedule you guys are on. But the sooner I can get that content written, the better.
Okay.
Unless it's in July, because I'll be away for 3 weeks.
How about Sonia, can you coordinate with SAB to set up a meeting, the chair? Does that work for everybody? And then Nancy, can Sonia also send you an advertisement?
Sure.
Okay. Is that all right with you, Sonia?
Yeah, that's fine. Do you want to make this in June, or you want to give it a little more time? What do you think? Because you were saying June or July, Nancy? Because you just sent
Because
out.
they're meeting tonight and they've been meeting a lot because of the town warrant. So
Okay.
I know they're not going to meet again quickly.
Right, so then should we give it a little time?
Maybe. I'm going to send you, do you have Becca's information?
I don't think I do.
I'm sending it to you right now.
Well, I can make contact anyway and see what they think. You know, maybe they'll give me a better idea of when would work.
Yep.
May I make a suggestion for Sonia, who's keeping the notes? Part of what I was thinking about before I voted aye was that there's several common issues to many of these landing questions. One is they cross private property, and what would happen if that private property disappeared, someone built a house on it. And the other is the second issue, which kept popping up, was sea level rise.
Okay.
So I think if we took our priorities and sort of categorize them, that would open the door to a very interesting discussion with SAB, I think.
Okay.
Okay. Helen, you don't mean to have your hand up, right?
No, I'm multitasking and I apologize. I'm usually better at this. I apologize.
No worries. All right. Anything else before we adjourn?
Or just
Great work.
for Nancy, congratulations on her award and enjoy your trip.
Thank you very much. Couldn't do it without all you guys and Johnny and Chris. Thanks.
Congrats, Nancy.
Thank you. Thanks
All
for
right.
your good work. This is so great that this is happening.
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right.
Quick question from Helen. Bruce and Steve, may I have your email addresses simply so that if I do things like send out the policy that I just sent out to 3 members, I can also copy you. I won't be, blasting you with lots of input, but I always like to communicate with a full committee. Would it be possible for me to get your email addresses, please?
Okay.
Yeah. Like I just sent out that select board policy so you could all read it about getting in touch with town council and, stuff like that. I'm basically doing a secretarial thing so that nobody else has to do it. I'm not trying to interfere, okay? If that's okay.
Yeah, good. How do you actually create a, I've typed in the chat. What do I do with it? Very good.
So my email address is HELMIR. Oh my God, we have to write on pieces of paper. HELMIRWIL at c4.net, the letter C and the number 4.net. And Melissa, Sonia, John, and Nancy all have it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Just trying to be efficient here.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.